On the second morning, Silflay did not begin until some time after dawn. A light wind was blowing straight into the north bank of the trees where the scrapes had been dug, and Bluebell, when he came up, swore he could smell rabbits on the breeze. "Maybe it's Holly, squeezing his chin glands for us, Hazelraw," he said. "A rabbit's sneeze on the morning's breeze sets homesick hearts aglow." "Oh yes, sitting with his rump in a chicory clump and longing for a nice plump doe," replied Hazel. "That won't do, Hazelraw," said Blueberry. "He's got 2 does up there already." "But they're hutch does," replied Hazel. "I dare say they're fairly tough and fast by now, but all the same, they're never going to measure up to our kind. Clover, for instance, she would never leave very far from the hole on Silflay, because she knew she couldn't run as fast as we can. But these Afrafandos, you see, they've been kept in by guards all their lives. Yet now there aren't any, and they wander around quite happily. Look at those two, right over there under the bank. They feel they can. Oh, great Frith!" And as he spoke, a tawny shape, dog-like, sprang out of the overhanging bushes, as silently as light from behind a cloud. It landed between the 2 does, grabbed one by the neck, and dragged her up the bank in a flash. The wind veered, and the reek of fox came across the grass. With a stamping and flashing of tails, every rabbit on the slope dashed for the nearest cover. Hazel and Bluebell found themselves crouched with Blackavar. The Afrafan was very matter-of-fact and detached. "The poor little beast," he said. "You see, their instincts are weakened by life in the mark. Fancy feeding under the bushes on the windward side of the woods. Never mind, Hazelraw. These things will happen. But look, I tell you what, unless there are 2 foxes, which would be terrible luck, we've got at least until the Frith to get away from here. That fox won't be hunting any more for some time, and I suggest we all move on as soon as we can." And with a word of agreement, Hazel went out to call the rabbits together. They made a scattered but swift run to the northeast, along the edge of a field of ripening wheat. No one spoke of the doe. They had covered more than 3/4 of a mile before Bigwig and Hazel halted to rest to make sure that no one had fallen behind. And as Blackavar came up with Hyacinthflay, Bigwig said, "You told us how it would be, didn't you? And I was the one that wouldn't listen." "Told you?" said Blackavar. "I don't understand." "You told us there was likely to be a fox." "I don't remember any of that, I'm afraid. I don't see how any of us could possibly have known, but anyway, that's one less doe." Bigwig stared at him in astonishment, but Blackavar, apparently unconcerned either to stress what he had said or to break off the talk, simply began to nibble at the grass. And Bigwig, puzzled, moved away and himself began to feed a little distance off, between Hyacinthflay and Hazel. "What's he getting at?" he asked after a while. "You were all there when he warned us, just 2 nights ago, that there was likely to be a fox, and I treated him badly for it." "Well, in Ephrafa," said Hyacinthflay, "if a rabbit gave advice, and the advice wasn't accepted, he immediately forgot it, and so did everyone else. Blackavar thought what Hazel decided, and whatever it turned out to be later to be right or wrong was all the same. His own advice had simply never been given." "I can believe that," said Bigwig. "Ephrafa. Ants led by a dog. But we're not in Ephrafa. Has he really forgotten that he warned us?" "Probably he really has, but whether or not, you'd never get him to admit that he warned you or to listen while you told him he'd been right. He could no more do that than pass Raka underground. But you're an Afrafan. Do you think like that too?" "Aha, but I'm a doe," said Hyacinthflay. During the early afternoon, they began to approach the belt, and Bigwig was first to recognize the place where Dandelion had told the story of the black rabbit of Inlay. "It was the same fox, you know," he said to Hazel. "I'm almost certain. I ought to have realized how likely it was that—" "Listen," said Hazel. "You know very well what we owe to you. The does all think Elarira sent you to get them out of Ephrafa. They believe no one else could have done that. As for what happened this morning, it was my fault as much as yours, but I never supposed we would get home without losing some rabbits. In fact, we've lost 2, and to be honest, that's better than I had expected. We can get back to the honeycomb tonight if we press on now. Let's forget about the fox for now, Bigwig. It can't be altered. And try to— Hello, who's this?" They were coming to a thicket of juniper and dog rose, tangled at ground level with nettles and trails of bryony blossoms, on which the berries were now beginning to ripen and turn red. And as they stopped to find a line into the undergrowth, 4 big rabbits appeared out of the long grass and sat looking down at them. One of the does, coming up the slope a little way behind, stamped and turned to bolt. They heard Blackavar check her sharply. "Well, why don't you answer his questions, Laley?" said one of the rabbits. "Who am I?" There was a pause, and then Hazel spoke. "I can see their effrevins, because they're marked," he said. "Is that Woodward?" "No," said Blackavar, at his shoulder. "That's Captain Campion." "I see," said Hazel. "Well, I've heard of you too, Campion. I don't know whether you mean any of us harm, but the best thing you can do is to leave us alone. As far as we're concerned, our dealings with you and Ephrafa are finished." "Well, you may think that," replied Campion, "but you'll find it's otherwise. That doe behind you must come with us, and so must any others that are with you." And as he spoke, Silver and Acorn appeared lower down the slope, followed by the Thuthanang. After a glance at the Ephraphans, Silver spoke quickly to the Thuthanang, who slipped back into the undergrowth, and then he came up to Hazel. "I've just sent for the white bird, Hazel," he said. As a bluff, it was very effective. They saw Campion look upwards nervously, and others in the patrol glance back to the cover behind them in the bushes. "What you're saying is stupid," said Hazel to Campion. "There are many more of us here, and unless you've got more rabbits than I see, we're far too many for you to deal with." Campion hesitated. The truth was that for once in his life, he had acted rashly. He had seen Hazel and Bigwig approaching, with Blackavar and one doe behind them, and in his eagerness to have something really worthwhile to show on his return to the council, he had jumped to the conclusion that they were alone. The Ephraphans usually kept fairly close together in the open, and it had not occurred to Campion that other rabbits might straggle more widely. He had seen a golden opportunity to attack and perhaps even kill the detestable Flaley and Blackavar, together with their one companion, who seemed to be injured, and bring the doe back to the council. This they certainly could have done, but he had decided to confront rather than ambush them, in the hope that the bucks would surrender without fighting. But now, as more and more rabbits began to appear in ones and twos, he realized that he had made a mistake. "I have a great many more rabbits," he said. "The does must stay here. The rest of you can go. Otherwise, we shall kill you." "Very well," said Hazel. "Bring your whole patrol into the open, and we'll do as you say." By this time, a considerable number of rabbits were coming up the slope. Campion and his patrol looked at them in silence, but made no move. "You better stay where you are," said Hazel. "If you try to interfere with us, it will only be the worse for you. Silver and Blackberry, take the does and continue. The rest of us will join you." "Hazelraw," whispered Blackavar, "the patrol must be killed. All of them. They mustn't be allowed to report back to the general." This had also occurred to Hazel, but as he thought of the dreadful fight and the 4 Ephraphans actually torn to pieces, for that is what it would mean, he could not find it in his heart to do it. And like Bigwig, he felt a strange reluctance for liking Campion. Besides, it would take quite some doing. Quite probably, some of his own rabbits would be killed, certainly terribly wounded. They would not reach the honeycomb that night, and they would leave a fresh trail of blood wherever they traveled. And apart from his dislike of the whole idea, there were disadvantages that might be fatal. "No, we'll leave them alone," he replied. Blackavar fell silent and sat watching Campion as the last of the does disappeared through the bushes. "Now," said Hazel, "take your patrol and go the same way that you saw us come. Don't speak, just go." Campion and the patrol made off downhill, and Hazel, relieved to be rid of them so easily, hurried after Silver with the others close behind him. And once through the belt, they made excellent progress, and after the rest of a day and a half, the does were in good shape. The promise of an end to the journey that night, and the thought that they had escaped both from a fox and a patrol, made them eager and responsive. The only cause for delay was Blackavar, who seemed uneasy and kept hanging around at the back of the group. At last, in the late afternoon, Hazel sent for him and told him to go on ahead, following the line of the path they were following, and to look out for the long strip of beech trees in the dip. Blackavar had not gone very far or very long before he came racing back. "Hazelraw, I've been quite close to that woods you spoke of," he said, "and there are 2 rabbits playing about on a patch of grass just outside it." "I'll come and see," said Hazel. "Dandelion, you come too, will you?" And as they ran down the hill to the right of the track, Hazel fairly skipped to recognize the beech trees. He noticed 1 or 2 yellow leaves and a faint touch of bronze here and there among the green boughs. Then he caught sight of Buckthorn and Strawberry running towards them across the grass. "Hazelraw!" cried Buckthorn. "Dandelion, what happened? Where are the others? Did you get any does? Is everyone okay?" "They'll be here very soon," said Hazel. "Yes, we've got a lot of does, and everyone who left has come back. This is Blackavar, who's come out of Ephrafa." "Oh, good for him," said Strawberry. "Hazelraw, we've been watching at the end of the woods every night since you left. Holly and Boxwood are all right. They're back at the warren, and what do you think about this? Clover's going to have her litter. That's fine, isn't it?" "Oh, it's splendid," said Hazel. "She'll be our first. My goodness, what a time we've had, I can tell you, and so I shall. What a story. But it must wait a bit. Come on, let's go and bring in the others." And by sunset, the whole party, 20 rabbits altogether, had made their way up the length of the beech trees and had reached the warren. They fed among the dew and the long shadows, with twilight already fallen into the fields below them. And then they crowded down into the honeycomb to hear Hazel and Bigwig tell the story of their adventures to those who had waited so eagerly and so long to hear it. And as the last rabbits disappeared underground, the wide patrol, which had been following them from Caesar's Belt with extreme skill and discipline, veered away in a half-circle to the east, and then turned towards Ephrafa. Campion was an expert at finding a night's refuge in the open. He planned to rest until dawn, and then cover the 3 miles back by evening of the following day.